Well, good morning, Crosspoint. Happy New Year. I'm glad that we all get to be together again. I missed you guys last Sunday. And I'm really excited because we are entering a season here where for the next few weeks our life groups are open. Life groups are so core to who we are here at Crosspoint, and being a part of one is so crucial, I know, in my life. And so if you are not part of a life group around here, I really want to encourage you to get signed up, okay? And so you can do that through the Crosspoint Cape app or head out to the Welcome Center because we want you to be able to be a part of a group here at Crosspoint and to be able to engage in what God's doing through that power of community and really how we see the church lived out by the early church in the New Testament. We see there is this immense amount of community and relationship that takes place. And so I really just want to encourage you guys in that to join us. I am going to share today my favorite story in the Old Testament. It's actually, this sermon that I've prepared is kind of an adjusted sermon that I got to teach to our students at camp this past summer, and was just trying to prepare it for them, and then walked off the stage at camp and thought, like, man, I really want to share this with our church family at Crosspoint. And so as we were getting ready for this new year, I thought, let's start off with this message, okay? And so I hope that you guys are able to glean something from this, because it's been really cool in my life as I've been impacted by what God has for us in this story in the Old Testament, okay? So my son Tyler, though, he plays this game called Describe Something, okay? I've talked to you guys before about how he loves movie nights. My son Tyler is 4 years old. He's obsessed with movie nights. Every night of the week he wants it to be movie night. It can't be movie night every night of the week. But at dinner, almost every day, at some point Tyler will look up and say, hey, can we play Describe Something? I'm like, sure, Tyler, what's the category? And there are a lot of categories to choose from, right? Animals, right? Places. But Tyler, 99% of the time, chooses the same category, movies. Right? And so he's like, here we go, let's describe a movie. And so we'll play Describe Something, right? And so I'll give you guys an example, right? If I was playing Describe Something, I would say to you, this is a movie about a boy who is pretty poor. He has a best friend who is a monkey. He dreams someday of living in a palace. Then he meets a beautiful princess. There's a genie involved. What movie am I talking about? Aladdin, all right? So we'll play Describe Something, all right? And so I thought it'd be interesting today if for this Old Testament story, we could play Describe Something, okay? So I want you guys to hang with me, all right? So this is a story about a man. This man is really the least of these by the social standards of his day. He one day is just minding his business. He's just out in the world trying to take care of his family's livestock when he is approached by the prophet Samuel. And he is anointed as the next king of Israel. And then after he's anointed, nothing happens for a little bit, but then shortly afterwards, he has this heroic moment where he rescues God's people. Who am I talking about? I heard a Saul out there. I heard a lot of David. Guess what? It works for either one. Saul or David. All of the things are true of both of them. King Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. He said that my family is from the tribe of Benjamin, which is the least important tribe, and my family is the least important family in the tribe of Benjamin. One day he's out looking for some donkeys that have been lost by his family, and he gets approached by Samuel. And God says, this is going to be the next king. Samuel anoints him with oil. And then later, he has this heroic moment where he rallies the nation of Israel to rescue an entire town of people. and save them from certain death. David, we know his version, right? We've heard that story a lot of times in our lives about David, who is the youngest brother, and how Samuel shows up to his house, this prophet of God, and says, hey, I've been told by God that the next king of Israel is one of your sons, Jesse. And Jesse starts the parade, right? And it's all these older boys, and he doesn't even include David. But Samuel gets to the end of the sons and is like, do you have any more? And Jesse's like, yeah, I mean like the little one. And they go and they get David, and he is anointed as the next king of Israel, and then nothing happens for a little bit, and then he has his heroic moment. And I love the similarities because the ends of the story are so different, right? When we look back on King Saul, his time ends in tragedy and chaos. He is controlled by fear. His reign would be characterized as disobedient, erratic, chaotic, harsh. And then we would talk about King David, and we'd be like, he is a man after God's own heart. He is the most famous of the kings of Israel, and his name is included in the lineage of Jesus. It's not just a name included on the list, it's a focal point. It's a big deal that Jesus came from the line of David. That's how important David is, and yet their stories start off with so much similarity. And yet something changes. So what was it? What happened in their lives that caused their stories to take such different paths? I think that the answer to this is really all through the book of 1 Samuel, but specifically today I want to focus in on the most famous David story probably, David and Goliath, which is found in 1 Samuel 17, because I think it really illustrates these truths that we find, these truths of how their lives broke away from each other. And so I'll set the scene for you guys a little bit here. The Israelites are facing off against the Philistines. They're like arch rivals. It seems like they fight every year. And so they're getting ready to, these armies are getting ready to face off. And then this thing happens that to us seems very strange, but was actually relatively normal in their time, where one side would send out a champion, and instead of all of the soldiers fighting, each side would send out one person, a champion from each side, and those two would fight, and the winner would win the battle. It was a way for the battle to be decided without as much loss of life. And so, a challenge is issued. The Philistines send out their champion, Goliath, who I think is a very well-named person, right? Like his mom had a hunch, right? He's not named like something really puny, right? I was going to give examples and then immediately thought like, that's going to be somebody's name. I'm going to do that. And so I decided not to. But Goliath comes out and his name tells you without any other information, like he's a monster, okay? His name is Goliath. And he is a literal giant. He's absolutely huge, and he's terrifying. And he starts to come out and taunt the Israelites. He challenges them. He challenges their God. He makes fun of them. He picks on them, and he goes on and on and on. And the Israelites refuse to send out a champion. Nobody wants to go fight him. And so day after day after day, this routine starts, where Goliath will come out, and he will challenge, and he will taunt, and the Israelites will cower in fear. And this goes on for over a month, this daily ridicule. And then I want to pick up this story in verse 4 of chapter 17, okay? Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. Shaq's 7 feet tall, so just do with that what you will. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. I did this sermon at camp. I told you guys this, so I have this in here. This is specifically to a middle school boy, okay? If there's any middle school boy in here or high school boy who weighs around 125 pounds, would you just stand up, in the ballpark? Nobody? Some of you were at camp and you stood. The illustration is that 125 pounds is the weight of a small child or a large, I don't know, it was fine. It worked back then. He also wore bronze leg armor and carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor-bearer walked ahead of him, carrying a shield. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I'm the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we'll be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Deeply shaken. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Here, with thousands of years of history protecting us, right? And many of us knowing the end of the story, we read this and we're like, why were you so scared? Why do you think they were scared? This dude was over 9 feet tall. And he wasn't so skinny that he could barely stand, okay? The armor that he carried tells us this was a absolute mountain of a human. And he walked out and challenged, "One of you, by yourself, come fight me." No. Right? I'm a relatively big guy. I'm 6'5". I weigh more than I want to. And I don't want to fight him. I don't want to battle him. He is an absolute giant. As I was preparing for this, I found this picture which kind of estimates, right? We don't know, but this is the heights of Goliath and David. This is their estimations of what these two dudes would have looked like for a photo op. That's terrifying, okay? That is a absolutely huge person. And so as much as we want to make fun of the armies of Israel that they wanted nothing to do with fighting this guy, you didn't want anything to do with fighting him either. I brought this along for kind of a common day example. I'm 6'5". And that's Mr. Describe Something himself, right? And I want to be very clear here. I'm not insinuating that I would fight a 4-year-old, okay? What I'm saying is that if I did, it wouldn't be a fair fight, okay? That's what we're trying to say here. We actually read in this story, kind of in the chapters surrounding this, that Saul gets this characteristic that's talked about, that he is a head taller than anyone else in Israel. And I heard a pastor say years ago that from a human perspective, whoever was going to fight Goliath should have been the biggest dude. And that it should have been Saul. And I heard that and I was like, yeah, this makes total sense. Why was Saul scared? It should have been him that would have fought him. But at a certain size differential, a head taller doesn't really matter. Okay? I brought along another picture to demonstrate. This is Tyler with his cousin Porter. Porter's older, and so he's about a head taller than Tyler there. Once again, not insinuating that I would fight a small child. But does it really matter at that point? Like that he's just like a little bit taller? No. This is a total mismatch. This is a scenario that would send any of us running. It would send any of us into a place where we wanted to just hide in our tent and hope that it would all go away. Hope that at some point this human grizzly bear would leave. Hope that maybe we could just face off army against army because that felt like I had a better chance of survival. And then David shows up. We're going to jump ahead to verse 32, okay? Look what David says here. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. That's a different reaction. Don't worry about him. I'll go fight him. What? Why? Why would you do this? Like, why would you think that this is a good decision? What from you, a guy who got left at home to take care of the sheep while your brothers go off to war, what makes you think that it's a good idea for you to go fight him? Verse 33. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. He agrees. There's no way that you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I love this story, guys. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I will go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I've done this to both lions and bears. And I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord, who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear, will rescue me from this Philistine. How does David respond with confidence? How does he respond by showing up and being like, I'll go kill him. Sure, fine, I don't care. It's not because he just built up confidence over the years, right? Because that's the temptation in the first part of the story, to be like, oh, wow, David's killed lions and bears. Of course he's not scared of this guy. Like, wow, David's kind of a boss. David understands that in those situations, the Lord rescued him. In those situations, the Lord delivered him. In those situations, he was able to rely on his God to take care of him. And if his God could take care of him then, his God can take care of him now. And so that's how he is able to stare down a giant and have total confidence that there's nothing for him to worry about because of God, because of his strength. So I love this next part, okay? We're going to skip ahead again, but David gives this speech. He yells this speech out to Goliath, and I think you can hear his heart in it. And it's manly and a little aggressive and sounds like he's about to go kill somebody, because he is. But hear his confidence in this. Hear his heart here. Verse 45, David replied to the Philistine, "You've come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of the men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people. But not with the sword or the spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us." David knows who he is. David knows where his identity comes from. David understands his purpose in life. He has total confidence here. And I mean, you guys know what happens next? He does it. He goes out and he defeats Goliath. The greatest upset in all of history, right? The upset to which all upsets would be compared to for all time. If you've ever watched March Madness, you know it's true. And he knows from the very beginning, this isn't me. This isn't my strength. This isn't because I'm more clever than you. This isn't because I've worked harder than you. This is because of who God is. And I know who I am because I know who he is. And then after this incredible victory, after David kills Goliath, I want you guys to pay attention to what happens next, okay? In chapter 18, when the victorious Israelite armies was returning home after David killed the Philistine, women from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. This was their song. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Guys, Saul is undone right here. He's never the same. He really goes off the deep end from here. Later in chapter 18, David is trying to comfort Saul. He's trying to help him out, and Saul picks up a spear and tries to kill David. Same chapter. Saul over and over and over again reacts in fear, and his entire reign spirals, and his life ends in suicide. Man, it falls apart. And why? Like, why does David killing a giant and people celebrating that cause Saul to fall apart, guys? I mean, his people, the nation that he is king over, they were rescued. They were delivered. God has received the glory and the honor and the praise. Sure, people celebrated David too. But guys, Saul already has his heroic moment. He's already done this. He's rallied the people before. He is the king. When we talk about David, it's hard to get very far into speaking of him without talking about how God describes him, about how he is described both in the Old and the New Testament. David is described as this man who's after God's own heart, right? But here's the truth of that. That's not because David was perfect. Brian shared with you guys, he messes up big time. The reason that he is a man after God's own heart is because David is after the heart of God. That is what David is after in his life. That is what he is in pursuit of with everything that he has. He is after the heart of God. That's what he wants in life. He wants to be close to his God. He wants to honor him. He wants to worship him. He wants to walk in obedience with him. That's what he's in pursuit of. That's where he finds his identity and his worth, is in this truth that he is chasing after the heart of God. Guys, Saul was after the hearts of people. That's what he was after. That's what was most important to him. That was what he was pursuing. That is his priority here. And when those hearts start to swing towards attention to others, when there is confrontation towards Saul, he's undone. See, two stories that start so similarly end so differently because of what they were after, because of what they chose to pursue. The heart of God or the hearts of people. And I know we're a week in now, but as we enter a new year, there's a lot of reflecting that happens with that, right? What was, what will be. For many of us, there's goal setting because we don't want to call them resolutions because we're too cool for that, right? Guys, as we enter this year, what will be your pursuit? What will you be after? What will define you? What's going to be most important in your lives? Is it the new car? The bigger house? Is it the approval of your friends? The approval of your coworkers? The approval of your boss and that promotion that comes with it? Is it the approval of your kids? The approval of your spouse? Or is it the heart of God? And there's nothing wrong with so many of those things I just listed, guys. But we have to decide what our primary pursuit in life is. Because at some point, if it is anything other than the heart of God, it will lead us astray. It will lead us ultimately to doom, to hurt, to brokenness. We have to choose to be after the heart of God. And so, Crosspoint, I want to encourage you this year, pursue the heart of God. Would you pray with me? Father God, I thank you for your incredible wisdom, love, grace. I thank you for the way that you pour truth out through your word, God. I thank you for stories that seem simple and fun and almost folk-tale-y about a little shepherd boy defeating a giant. I thank you that through that you have poured truth into our lives. That you have showed us through events that happened thousands of years ago, people who lived thousands of years ago. You've showed us how to live our lives. And Father, today, we pursue you. Today, we say that you are what is most important. You are more important than the job or the money. God, your approval matters more. It matters more than our bosses or our coworkers. It matters more than our spouse, God. That ultimately we care, that we honor you, that we glorify you. Father God, I pray that your name will be lifted high. In Jesus' name.